We're talking today about the need to be needed and the need to belong. And everything that I'm about to discuss is going to tie back to why that's so important. And so let me just start by just recapping some of my experiences. One was high school. I wasted 4 years of not trying very hard, basically giving up and just doing whatever I had to do to get by. Graduated mediocre at best, go to college, and immediately freshman year, one of the classes that I had to take, I was required to take, was called Learning to Learn. I didn't know what the hell it was. And when I asked about it, I was told, well, you showed signs of being very strong academically early on in high school, and you basically regressed for 4 years. And so we thought that this type of course would help you learn more effectively. If you took this, it may change the next 4 years. And I'm thinking, all right, I mean, I didn't know I had a learning problem, but the truth is I had a caring problem, and I just stopped really caring about school. It wasn't, unless I was interested in the class, I wasn't listening and I wasn't going, and as each year went by, I missed more and more time at school, and I just did whatever I had to do to get by and to pass. And that was it. And when I got out, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I've told this story before, and it was like a pain in the ass. And I was purposeless, absolutely purposeless. And I wasn't one, there were no companies out there saying, oh, I can't wait for this kid to graduate. Nobody was waiting for me when I graduated. Nobody was hiring me after I graduated. And you know what? They shouldn't have, because I had no work ethic. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I didn't bring anything to the table other than I was needy. I needed money. And that wasn't very attractive to anybody. And you know what? The whole damn thing was my own fault. So I say that because it wasn't until I started to prioritize responsibility and I started to prioritize the need to develop myself, skills or health or whatever, that things started to change until I became a product or a person that people wanted. I was just out on an island, and it was a sucky place to be. But that was the harsh reality of it, is until I prioritized myself, no one else was going to. And I say that because I was watching a quick couple news stories early this morning. One was about a robotics company. This robotics company actually creates robots that work in warehouses, and they pick packages. They show up. Well, they don't show up. They're there all the time, and they pick packages and load packages onto trucks and dollies and all that. And the reason they went down this path, and they've been around for a bit, but the reason they created this particular product was pandemic driven. It's for safety reasons, it's probably better and safer to have a robot doing this work than a person. A robot is not going to pass along COVID, and it's not going to get anybody else sick. But over and above that, a robot is actually going to show up. It's actually going to show up to work. It's not going to fail a drug test. It doesn't have a criminal history. It's not going to fight with other people. It's not going to come in drunk. It's not going to come in high. None of that stuff. It's just going to get it done, and it's safe and it's clean and all those things. And companies, these companies are like, I'll buy one of those, and which is great for those. It's a way to keep going. It's a way to survive, and they have. And the automation company, the robotics company that created it, they're doing really well. But in the meantime, the people that were doing those warehouse jobs before don't have a job anymore, and they're not needed anymore. The companies are learning not to need people, especially if the people don't bring skills that they need or want or whatever, or they're a pain in the ass. What the pandemic has done over the last year for many, many organizations is it's taught them to be more efficient, not just with automation, with everything. It's taught smart, creative companies how to be more efficient, how to get more done, how to make more money. I cannot tell you how many companies I've talked to in the last 6 months that have more money today than they did pre-pandemic. These are companies that have gotten PPP loans, that have managed those loans properly, paid, spent the money in the right places, had those loans forgiven, but they've also continued to generate revenue. They've also continued to make adjustments to the way they do business. They've made decisions to move on from certain people. They've determined maybe we don't quite need this much space. Maybe we don't need these employees anymore. Maybe we can renegotiate our leases. Maybe we can renegotiate our terms with the bank. Smart people, creative people, people that run these organizations have figured out a way to survive, profit, and do so more efficiently and effectively. And many have realized, I don't need to rely on these people anymore. Now, they still have people. It's the highly skilled people that are not as easily replaced. It's the lower end people that are much easier to replace. You can automate a lot of that. And I bring it up because the second story, actually the story that preceded this one, I should say, was about a warehouse worker, 12 years doing this type of job, was laid off during the pandemic, has not been able to find work since. Now, I don't necessarily believe that there's no work out there. Not every company has automated their warehouses. This guy claims that he hasn't been able to get a job, and he's applied online and he's very discouraged and no one's calling him back. And it's been, I don't know, 6 months. I don't know exactly what the time frame is, but it's been a reasonable amount of time. And he's pretty down about it. Has he tried everything? Probably not. Is there no jobs out there? Probably not. I think there are jobs out there, but in his mind, he's not employed because he doesn't have the skills. And for years, the United States has been pushing jobs overseas until recently. I mean, there's a lot of talk over the last 4 years about bringing certain work back. And I know some did come back. But for years and years and years, we've been pushing stuff overseas, factories, mills, all that stuff. And those cities and towns and communities and families were devastated, never really recovered. Good, hardworking, blue-collar people who might not have had skills, but they threw their heart and soul into these jobs that were taken away from them. The rug pulled out from right underneath them. Sorry, we can make more money and do things cheaper somewhere else. Thanks for your time. See you later. Done. And that sucks. But what I get concerned about today, and that's unskilled labor. Okay, yeah, you didn't have a college degree and your hands were probably tied and that shouldn't have happened and that's too bad. Today, our unskilled labor pool is even bigger. We've got more unskilled labor graduating from college than ever. And I think about this all the time. I've been ranting about this for years. I think education is absolutely critical. It is essential. I question if what we're teaching in these schools is as relevant to real life as it could and should be. Some of it is. I mean, if you go to school for engineering, or and I didn't, or if you go to school for, electronics and I didn't, or you pick up a trade, I didn't do that, finance, whatever. If you go to school to be a doctor, all those things, yeah, you're needed. Those are skill sets that are in short supply in this country. You're going to get a job. Even if you're kind of a dink as a person, you're more likely to get a job. But if you don't go to school for that, you do what I did, you go to school for communication or psychology or history, or nothing wrong with any of that, just that very few, those skills aren't in demand. I tell my kids all the time, so my oldest is going in the fall, and thankfully he's gotten accepted to several schools, and they've given some money, which is great. So that's going to ease the burden. We've saved some money to help, but I'm not of the belief, and neither is my wife, that we're going to pay the whole way through. One, we can't, but we will contribute, and we will take a good portion of the burden away, provided, and the agreement is provided, that you get a certain minimum grade with everything. And if that doesn't happen, the money's not coming. We're not going to fund playtime. We're not going to fund bad grades. You've got to put some time and effort into this and graduate with something. The other thing is you're going to graduate with some skin in the game. You're going to graduate carrying some debt, not crippling debt, but you're going to come out with something. It's your choice as to how much you want to come out with. Because the reality is my opinion is that keeps the kid more focused when they have a sense of responsibility, obligation, not to me and not to my wife, and to themselves, earning things, working for things. And so that's my perspective on that, because the reality is companies, jobs, they're not standing there open arms waiting for this next crop of college grads to come out. They are not waiting for the next psychology major or education major or communication major. They're not waiting for that. And we have way too many of those coming through our schools, adding to this population of unskilled people. I don't care if you have a college degree, you're an unskilled resource is what you are. And is that what the companies are wanting and needing? And if you come out and you're not wanted or needed, what does that do? Are we just feeding our unemployment problem? Are we just feeding our mental illness problem, our depression problem, our anxiety problem, our less than enough problem, all this stuff that's crept into our population? Are we just feeding that by creating, by just churning college grads who aren't hireable or who aren't wanted? Now, you can be, and I talk with my kids about this all the time. If you choose to go to school and you don't pick up a hard skill like I didn't, you better be an awesome communicator. You better be great with other people. You better have a kick-ass work ethic. You better be reliable, competent, curious. You better be humble. Nobody is going to spend too much time with the person that's a problem, with the person that's a headache. They're not going to do it. It's just, and especially now, as we're learning to be more efficient and figuring out ways to get by without people, organizations are going to be less and less tolerant of the person who's a headache, of the person that's just too needy, of the person that's not resilient. I do get concerned about the lack of resilience. If we're not battle tested, if we aren't coming out with some grit, if we stay on the couch too long collecting, how resilient are we when we go back to work? If we go back to work, are we gonna quit the first time somebody rides our ass for not getting something done? Are we gonna need the afternoon off because somebody holds us accountable? Are we gonna be the person that calls in sick once a week because I just can't take the pressure? The reality is it's just as much on the individual as it is on the company. The divide is getting greater. The companies have to look and say, what are we missing from a skills perspective? And what kind of quality person are we willing to hire, even without skills, to teach them those skills? And I think that's part of the answer. Is an organization can say, I know that the schools aren't necessarily churning out the exact skill set that we want and need, but we do know the type of individual we want. We do know the values that we're looking for, the work ethic we're looking for. We will forfeit the skills and teach them those skills if they can bring these things to the table. I think that's part of the answer. And for the individual, I think we all have to look in the mirror like I had to do years ago. And I still talk about this stuff to this day. To what extent are you going to take responsibility for yourself? We only belong and we are only needed when we create something that people want. And if we don't work on ourselves, and if we don't take the time to develop a skill set or to develop a work ethic or to develop the ability to care about something, if we don't do those things, we are less and less employable. And so that's my thought on this. I do know for a fact it is a problem. I do know that the gap is widening. I know that there are companies out there that are absolutely killing it right now. And I know there's another segment of the population that's becoming more and more distant from that success. They're that much further removed from the possibility of that success. And somehow we're going to have to figure out a way to bridge that gap unless we want to deal with more social problems. So send me your thoughts on that. Email me. I get a lot of feedback, not necessarily on the post, but private texts and emails, and keep them coming. I've got a really cool podcast coming up at the end of this month with one of the Pilates instructors in town. Her name's Sheila Donovan. She owns a Pilates studio in my town. We're going to talk about minority-owned businesses, a little bit on Black Lives Matter, a little bit about trying to run that kind of business in the pandemic. So it should be really, really fun. That's going to come out late March. And I will do my best to put out one more episode between now and then. I know I've been off for a few weeks. I've just been busy with work, and I got to get back on the horse here. So hope you enjoyed this one, and we'll catch up with you in the next couple of weeks.